All right, everybody. Hi, Alex Goff from Golf Rugby Report here with Shannon Bustillos, Mike Hodgins, and we're going to be talking about training in the era, the quasi post COVID era. Shannon is in charge of training and education in rugby in the Midwest for USA Rugby. Is I would say certified by World Rugby as an education and trainer in rugby, and Mike is in charge of the Northeast region, doing the same thing. You've been working, both of you, for years in terms of educating coaches and training coaches and referees as well. Um, all that stuff that is really, really important when we talk about getting teams on the field and fulfilling our obligation to make sure that the coaches know what they're doing, they're safe. Everyone's like, stay safe. They're talking about COVID, but safety is an important part of rugby all the way through. Um, so let me ask you guys, first of all, what has it been like in your field since rugby shut down about a year ago, um, and no one was playing? What's it been like in terms of dealing with the training and education side of it?
So, as you know, last March, virtually all rugby came to a standstill. With both the bankruptcy and the COVID shutdown, all training and education activities were suspended. So for about from March until about August, nothing happened. I mean, it was radio silence all around. But as USA Rugby started to go through the reorganization and started the emergence out of bankruptcy process, we slowly started to get together again and start talking about, well, what's this going to look like when we come back? So, we slowly started having some discussions and conversations.
Shannon, were you here? Were people asking like what's happening?
I'm sure Mike got him on his end. I got him on my end because I know Mike's a huge resource even before he was the regional administrator out in the Northeast. And with me and in our roles, Mike and I have both been trainers for World Rugby for quite some time. So just constant questions. How is this going to work? What's it going to look like? And we honestly didn't, we really didn't know. And I mean, that's the coolest thing about working in the training and education is, you don't know. And it's been a learning experience for sure.
Interesting. So what did you start to get together to piece ideas together and an approach, a virtual approach?
Well, so the first thing we did was, as these community agreements were being worked out. So as these community agreements were being worked out, part of the conversation was how these different uh, uh, communities were going to approach and wanted to handle training and education. Um, as you know, USA Youth and High School set up a separate organization, still affiliated with USA Rugby. The Club Council has their council that's affiliated with USA Rugby, as does the colleges, and the college is kind of a different story. But so as these got some momentum again, a big part of this discussion was that they wanted a less centralized approach. They wanted a more regionalized approach. They wanted more of the responsibility to be handled on a local level. So the idea came to pass that if they could regionalize this, that it would be a lot closer to the grassroots, and a lot closer for people that knew the unique requirements and circumstances of their area. So that's how this kind of regional approach got off the ground.
So it was more about, yeah, as you said, regionalization rather than. I was curious as to whether there were sort of new approaches, virtual approaches using the technology that everyone's been using, um, whether that's become more prevalent.
It has, and again, it goes back to it's been a huge learning experience for all of us. I mean, even as educators, Mike and I have been doing in person for years. So, I mean, I've been learning some things, and there's been pros and cons with it. But I mean, we basically all had to kind of figure out how we're going to do this online. How are we going to understand, or how are we going to know that our participants are competent in some of these areas? without, just with being online. I know Mike and I think it was Martha and those guys did some 300 stuff. Nancy started doing some intro and trying to relearn, like, how are we going to do this online? So just like in every stream of education from kindergarten, grade school, high school, we were going through it ourselves.
There's a lot of hands-on. Everybody is familiar with going to the referee clinics or education classes or the coaching education. All right, let's boot up. Let's get out on the field. Let's start dealing with some real world examples. Can't do that.
So the practical aspect of these courses, and by practical I mean things that are done, like you said, on the field, whether it's refereeing, coaching, strength and conditioning, whatever it is. Those are such an important part of the learning process. And the other side of that is that these are all these courses are part of the World Rugby training and education portfolio. So they have some pretty stringent requirements in terms of demonstrated competencies, especially in some of the on-field things. So one of the real challenges was to find a way to convert some of these offerings to a online environment. And there's certain ones that just can't be done online and won't be. So we kind of picked and choose what course offerings could be easily transitioned to a online or virtual delivery, and then we started working on those. So we've kind of gotten to a point where we've got some things that we're offering online, but we also have some things that we've developed some COVID safe delivery methods and some COVID safe delivery protocols that World Rugby has in place and USA Rugby has in place. So we're actually returning to in-person delivery right now. There is some pretty stringent requirements around COVID protocols as we do that, though.
Sure. Okay. Well, can you give me a couple of examples first on the virtual side? Is there something that sort of moved to virtual successfully?
Yeah. So the level 300, the World Rugby Level 2 coaching / USA Rugby Level 300, we're now in the second round of groups that are going through that course. And so what we've done is we've transitioned from what used to be a 2-day in-person course, so 2 8-hour days on a weekend, to 4 2-hour online meetings, and then the competencies that have to be met in terms of their actual on-field coaching. We're going to work towards those later on, either by having like a huddle type of site available for coaches to upload video to us, or when we have reasonably physically proximity to these coaches, be able to actually go out and observe them coaching or observe them refereeing, so we can actually do the assessment piece at a later date. So that's one thing that's working pretty well.
Yeah, and I'll have to echo what Mike just said too. And speaking with Karen Fong Donahue, who does a lot of referee stuff, she had mentioned that some of the opportunities of us doing some of this new stuff that we never did before, because we always did in-person stuff, is these opportunities, like Mike just said, your online preparation can almost kind of be like the theory, and then when you do the in-person, it'll be the actual application.
Then on the other side, Shannon, Mike mentioned making some changes in terms of doing some of the in-person stuff with an eye toward COVID. How's that been? What are you seeing there in terms of the kinds of changes that need to be made?
I mean, it's kind of tough. I can't speak for Mike. I know in the Midwest, I've had a few people reach out and want to do courses and ask what it's entailed. And when I get I've gotten quite a bit of those emails. And when I actually send them back, like the protocol and the checklist of what they have to do for COVID, like for example, you have to have a COVID monitor. You
Right.
have to make sure things are wiped down every X amount of time. And it's not a daunting list, but it is a little bit more involved for the host. And I was joking before that sometimes we were lucky if the host would even actually provide the lunch that was in the contract. So a lot of those emails I've gotten about hosting, when I send them, here's what you have to do, I really don't get a response. So I don't know if it's just a little too daunting, or but it's a little bit more involved.
Right.
But
So at least maybe they're just checking to see, can we do that? I mean, can we find, if, as you said, if people just think that all they're doing is making available a room, there's a lot more to do than that.
Right, and it depends on the state too, because every state has different, protocols. Like here in Wisconsin, they're pretty stringent, and in Ohio, they're a little bit, looser. So then we have to stay on top of like, okay, what state's doing what, and we've actually kind of put that a little bit more on the hosts, but it varies from state to state.
So, but part of the overall requirement is that regardless of where a state or a region may be in terms of their local policies or guidelines, we still have to follow World Rugby / USA Rugby protocols. So, for example, if a state or a region is completely open, no restrictions, if we're going to do an in-person course, we still have to follow World Rugby protocol. And it's like Shannon said, it's not a huge task, but we do have to have a letter from the governing bodies saying that they're endorsing the course and are going to follow protocols. They have to do a symptom checker when they arrive. They have to take a temperature. They have to asking social distancing and sanitizing equipment between uses. But the other thing about it, Alex, is we're a year into this, so everybody's kind of gotten used to some of these, living with some of these things. So I don't think it's that onerous to do it, but it is a process. But we are starting to get courses going again throughout a good part of the country.
So is it going to end up being more difficult for people to get up to the next level they want to do, or it might turn out to be a little bit easier? You mentioned the level 300 US, level 2 World Rugby. I mean, in some senses, that sounds easy to do.
So once we get back to in-person delivery, we'll be able to do in-person and virtual. And depends on the region of the country. Like here in the Northeast, we have a pretty high density of rugby populations. So you could have a course in Albany or someplace in Connecticut or at Kutztown or someplace, and coaches can be there in an hour and a half, 2 hours. Well, if you're in Montana, Idaho, Dakotas, Colorado, to have a course for weekend, in-person delivery might just not be practical. So there's some areas where these virtual courses are really going to be a huge help to just getting people to come through the door and be a part of it. And there's other places that my suspicion is that when we really get back to a fully normalized in-person environment, that we'll probably do a lot less of the virtual. So I think it remains to be seen.
Yeah, and I would have to agree with Mike on that. That's I think that's something that we have learned as educators, and something that we have learned just through this whole process, that hey, this is a new tool we can use, this virtual thing. Like Karen said, maybe we can use this for the theory, and then we use something else for the application. I was also speaking with Katie Hunzinger, who's done a lot of referee courses for me, and she, there's pros and cons. Of course, there's pros and cons to everything, but this is great, this virtual. There's that increased accessibility, she mentioned, and Mike also mentioned, for people maybe in those remote areas. And then when it's time to do some practical application, they can attend something that's maybe like one day or half a day or something like that. So yeah, we've learned a lot through it as well. Sometimes we don't think about, I mean, we're lucky we're having this Zoom meeting right now. We have mic and camera and laptop and Wi-Fi accessibility, but not everybody has that.
Right.
So then you look at some of the cons might be, you look at, some programs we have in the US, and do people have those luxuries, I guess, of being able to take the time and have the Wi-Fi and have the nice laptop with the camera and the mic. So, I mean, there's going to be pros and cons with anything you do, but.
Have you had a situation where somebody has clicked the wrong button and suddenly they're a giant gopher talking to you instead of...
Not yet.
No, not personally. Not personally.
I mean, we might in the next 20 minutes, but
that's true. I'm looking forward to that. It'll be good. In terms, COVID aside, going ahead with let's talk first coach education.
Right.
Are we expecting any changes? Anything new coming down the pike in terms of how it's being approached, or whatever, or even just the law?
The newest thing right now in terms of both coach and referee education, and actually strength and conditioning as well, is that one of the things we've done during our time off is we've developed a introduction to refereeing and an introduction to coaching online course that has actually been pretty well received. And those two courses, for example, they're not certification courses, but they're like 2 to 3 hour online offerings facilitated by one of the World Rugby educators. And it's for parents new to the game, people that never coached, stakeholders in the community that uh, haven't ever dipped their toe in, so they can do a 2 to 3 hour seminar online and get a good overview of refereeing and a good overview of coaching. And then if they want to get certified, then they can take that next step. So it's kind of trying to hook new people in and trying to get new people involved. And both of those have been really well received. So those are new offerings. On the coaching side, we're more aligned with World Rugby than we used to be, because there's going to be less resources in the central office, which is what people want. I mean, they want a more decentralized model. So as we move forward, we're going to be more aligned with World Rugby's offerings and curriculum than we have in the past. And one of the things that may be coming down the pike at some point is us renaming our coaching certification to align with World Rugby. So that's one of the possible changes. And World Rugby has recently updated the level 2 coaching transcript, so that's changed a little bit. They've moved towards including a few more of their online education offerings in the requirements, but they've also kind of made the in-person coaching competencies a little bit more robust. But I mean, it hasn't changed dramatically. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Mike too with these intro courses. It's, I think the idea, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but the idea when we were first brainstorming, I think back in November when Jamie brought on the regional admins was, kind of get something like Mike said to hook some of these people in. And then I've had a lot of people that have taken it too as like a refresher course to kind of like keep their beak wet or whatever, just to be involved. So we've also got some people that are taking the refresher courses, and with a lot of the ones in the Midwest, we did like Rugby Ohio was one of the first ones, and they did 5, and then I did one for high school girls. Like I think, we're also going virtual is also maybe hooking a different audience because a lot of the younger kids are a lot more tech savvy. They maybe prefer this method. So we might be tapping in. I mean, it may not be a huge impact, but anybody that we can get to jump in the pool is great. Like Mike said too, I think these intro courses have been something awesome we've learned and something great that's come out of this whole situation. I mean, the only negative I can think about it is I get 100 emails about like, well, I went to the intro, so am I certified?
Oh, yeah. Okay, you're going to get that. So that actually somewhat sort of limps into the next topic, which is that people get this idea that, everything should be covered by their dues. And you do pay for this, right? You pay for the courses. And that's going to still be the case, correct? That
Yes.
Statement, because it has to support transporting the instructor somewhere, every lunch, there's a bunch of things that need to be taken care of, that need to be paid for, including people like yourselves spending a lot of time staying on top of all this, so you're ready at a moment's notice to put something on. Is there anything you can tell me about like how much it's going to cost, and whether there are any changes on that level?
So, in general, the price of most of the courses has come down a little bit. I don't know the whole pricing structure off the top of my head, but in general, the pricing structure has come down a little bit. And yeah, these are professional, certifications. All of our educators are trained and licensed, and yes, we do have to get in places, and we do have costs. So, there is a cost involved, and that's not going to go away anytime soon.
Well, I mean, all of that is great. So this doesn't cover everything. Where can a coach, referee, anybody involved in the game go to learn more about this?
You can just get on the USA Rugby website. It has the links and how to host. Last I looked, they have like the COVID protocols, that Mike had alluded to. before and how we want to align with World Rugby. And I think it's really important. I mean, I really love the fact with these regional administrators, like I've been working with Mike for years, Lisa Rosen, some of the other Fred Bardo in the Southeast. And one thing that I really like is that, this little group, at least with those three or four, we've been very passionate about training and education for years. So, I mean, I know I was happy that these guys were on board and what we want to do, and making sure that everybody, we always talk about modeling best practices, at least, like in our coaching courses, modeling best practices and, teaching these participants, that they need to do the same thing for their players or whatever. So I think that, a lot of the stuff that we're doing, modeling these best practices of World Rugby and staying in line with USA Rugby protocols and that we're all on the same team has been huge. It's been great. And I think a lot of the stuff that we're doing, it's early yet, but I think the foundation, a newer foundation, is getting laid, and it's going to be great moving forward. I think if we can get over these roadblocks of COVID and what we're doing so far, that's been good. It's just going to be better when we get back to in person.
All right. Excellent. All right. Well, Shannon, Mike, thank you very much for touching on something that I freely admit I don't touch on enough. And I think it's very educational for me. And I think it'd be useful to most of the rugby people out there. So, again, we're happy we're back on the field and we're going to get back in the classroom too. And that's good.